Good afternoon, everyone. Those that are attending the session live, face-to-face, here in Palazzo Mora in Venice, as well as those who are following this in the live broadcast through the YouTube channel of the Faculty of Architecture at TU Delft. So, well, thank you very much for joining us. So this is going to be a very simple, event where we will have two components followed by a small discussion, or it's not really a round table, but a kind of oblique or semicircle discussion. And the first component is going to be about this book that you can also see on the background. The book is the title of the book is Global Housing: Dwelling in Addis Ababa. We will talk a little bit about this later. This will be followed by the screening of a documentary produced by Antonio Paoletti, which is standing there to my right, with the title The Glow in the Mist. And after the screening of Antonio's documentary, we will have then the set discussion also with Ramona Scheffer, sitting to my immediate right, with Dick van Gameren, sitting to my left, and with Rohan Varma in the far left. So this is a simple program, as I said, and to begin with, I would pass the mic to Dick to give a little bit of the background of how this book came about, and then I will follow with a little explanation of its contents. So Dick.
Yeah, thank you, Nelson. And yeah, let me start by saying that I'm really very happy that we can sit here and have this presentation. We have been looking forward to this for more than 1.5 years. So it's great that it can finally happen here with the people involved. Unfortunately, still not everybody could be present here. I'm very sorry that Marina Tabassum cannot be here from Bangladesh. Yeah, for obvious reasons, she is not allowed. She cannot travel yet from Dhaka to Italy. But she is in a way the instigator of this exhibition that we see here from my chair on the left side. And of course we will discuss this later tonight in one of our BK talks. But Marina was a guest professor for 1 year, visiting professor in our global housing studios. And it was her suggestion to bring an exhibition that we had already made to celebrate her professorship in Delft, to bring this exhibition to the Biennale in Venice. And yeah, it's great that this happened. So if Marina is watching or is watching later, first of all, a great thank you to Marina. We miss you. Yeah, so it's a bit of a celebration. First of all, of Marina's guest professorship in Delft, working with our students, but it's more. I think this event is a celebration of the work we have been doing already for many years with students in Delft, in our what we like to call a global housing study group or study center, where together with partners all over the world and with students from all over the world, we try, I think it's really trying to address the enormous challenge of how to create affordable housing for the world that is rapidly urbanizing. And of course, it fits exactly in the theme of this Biennale. We didn't know that when we started, of course, our global housing studio, or when we made this exhibition, but now I think it's really a perfect fit. What we do this afternoon, later today we will have our discussion more on affordable housing worldwide, indeed on a global view. But today we want to present a first book in a series that we intend to make in the coming years. Obviously it's called Global Housing, but in it we want to show the results of our students' work, but also of the research we do with our local partners. In this case, the EIABC in Addis Ababa. So bringing the work of students and of the researchers together, to to show the results of a project, of a multi-year project. We've been working together with the faculty in Addis Ababa now for almost 10 years in different forms, and we're still working together. But we thought it was time to show to the rest of the world the outcome of the work we did together with our students, the Ethiopian students, and our colleagues in Ethiopia. So I hope it will be the first of a series. As you can see in the exhibition in the room we're sitting in, we worked with students not only in Addis Ababa, but also in Mumbai, in Tema in Ghana, in Dhaka, obviously, together with Marina. So we hope that this series will continue, but this is the first one. I'm very proud that I'm able here to show this, and I want to give the word back to Nelson.
Thanks a lot, Dick. Indeed, let's say, we hope that this is the first of a series, and this, of course, took a little bit longer to define a certain editorial strategy for it, but at a certain moment for us it was also clear that this should not just be a kind of repository, academic repository, where we would just show beautiful student projects, even though that will be already quite something. But we also thought that this should also be interlinked, so to speak, with research outputs from also colleagues that fortunately joined us in Delft doing their PhD dissertations, let's say, coming from Addis Ababa and developing their PhD on topics related with Addis Ababa, but then developed in Delft. So this maybe we can just go through the contents of the book. So I will ask to start the presentation, please. So next slide, please. Yeah, so here we see the cover, so already something that it's, of course, I will, yes, thank you. And so there's something that's already quite, that we are already quite proud of, because it's already contains little samples of the student work, including in the book. And here even, so it's already clear to see this editorial strategy where we thought it will be interesting to have a kind of confrontation between, well, reflections and a more projective attitude. So under reflections, there is a group of essays where, different, more scholarly articles address different aspects of housing in Addis Ababa, and also the urban transformation of Addis Ababa. And the projects, as I will show with a little bit more detail later, we have a selection of student work addressing different themes that we grouped according to different approaches that the city is to a certain extent calling for. So the first one, Reflections, starts with an article that me and Dick wrote, which is a kind of also looking back to the global housing educational program and also the research connected with it. So here, what for us has been quite interesting is to be confronted with realities that are very foreign to us, let's say. So that, I'm originally from Portugal, Dick is Dutch, and we have been traveling to Ethiopia, Bangladesh, Ghana, India, and of course these are all realities that are very, very different from those that we are more familiar with. So this confrontation with the stranger has been quite remarkable, and one of the things that has always been quite impressive is how time is such an important aspect to understand the urban transformation. So drawings like this one that you see, produced by a group of students enrolled in the studio, suggest how we need to understand the temporality as a key aspect to make sense of these urban conditions of cities experiencing rapid transformation. Then Dick wrote also a chapter with Anteneh, Tesfaye, Tola, so one of our colleagues finishing his PhD in Delft. And this is a chapter that talks about Addis Ababa and the role of diplomacy as an important component of the transformation of Addis Ababa. Of course, the fact that Dick is one of the designers of the Dutch embassy in Addis Ababa is not, it's not innocent, so obviously played a role in let's say, in using these lenses to look into the urban transformation of Addis Ababa. And together with Anteneh, it was, I think this chapter really shows how diplomacy played an important role in shaping the urban transformation of Addis Ababa, which, for those that don't know, it's a little bit like the Brussels of Africa to a certain extent, in the sense that it's also where the African Union has its headquarters, and many international organizations like the United Nations have important delegations in Africa. So to a certain extent, diplomacy plays a crucial role there. Then Anteneh, together with Brook, so the two PhDs working in Delft currently, finishing their PhDs, Anteneh and Brook halfway through, also wrote this beautiful chapter on a particular aspect of the urban tissue of Addis Ababa, which is the so-called Scheffers, which is a word, an Amharic word that does not have translation in English, and it's hard to find an appropriate translation, but I mean, roughly we could think of it as a community or a neighborhood. And this is a key feature, let's say, to decode the urban atmosphere of Addis Ababa, the social sphere, exchanges of people, materials, and so on. And this is also some of the illustrations that you can find there. Then Dick had his own take on trying to make sense of the different evolution of the architecture of housing in Ethiopia. And in this chapter, so Dick goes through the most vernacular form, the tukul, that can be found in the rural countryside in different variations in different regions of Ethiopia, all the way to to the so-called condominium housing that you see here on the picture. So this is really kind of condensed history of housing in Ethiopia. And then and this is a part that I've collected on patterns of inhabitation. So with this chapter, for us, it's also a way of putting through our strong belief that to try and understand a place like Addis Ababa, it's not, using an helicopter view is not good enough. I mean, it's actually not really the most important thing to do. What's really important is to understand the patterns of everyday life. So how people actually engage with each other in social interaction. So how borders are defined by tangible and intangible limits. But also how people, generate income. And also how people actually build their houses or their, say, what we call spatial practices. So all these things have been surveyed by the students and creating outputs like those that we see on the screen, where they use, let's say, the drawings to synthesize all these patterns of everyday life. And we strongly believe that when you know this, or when you become more familiar with these patterns of everyday life, chances are that when you just turn the shift to the projective mode, meaning when you act as a designer trying to shape a new urban condition, let's say, you do that not from a kind of bird's eye view, but actually from the bottom up, from the ground up. And so this is a chapter which is mostly visual and using different graphic outputs, but we believe a crucial component also of our educational approach and methodology. And then there is exactly a reflection on this methodology that was contributed by an anthropologist, Bregje van Eekelen, who traveled with us to Addis Ababa, and she wrote a beautiful chapter reflecting on these patterns and tensions as she could observe in these everyday conundrums of Addis Ababa. And this then sort of closes the, let's say, the reflections. And in the projects, what we did was try to make sense of more than 30 projects developed over the years and disseminated in different parts of Addis Ababa, and aggregate them, let's say, in 4 themes. And so one of the themes is urban mixing, the other one is redefining borders, the other one is it's about densification strategies, and the final is about accommodating heritage. And so all these different projects try to address these 4 challenges that we believe are there in Addis Ababa, but probably can also be extended to different parts of the world undergoing this rapid process of urbanization. So these projects that you can see try and to bring about, let's say, new and alternative approaches to the production of affordable and adequate housing, using new building techniques. For instance, here in this project by Federica Fogazi, there's this attempt to use ramped earth construction to create, let's say, some diversity in terms of typologies to accommodate different social and income groups. The same here in this project by Andrea Migotto, where he defines, let's say, a new way of bringing together, let's say, the informal, some sort of informal development of the city with a new way of redefining the borders. And it goes on with also with an attempt to accommodate, let's say, well, some of the invisibles, or the urban invisibles, like well, like refugees and rural urban migrants. And then we move to this project. It's about accommodating the vernacular, or accommodating heritage. So it's a project actually developed by Ariana and Paolo Turconi. Ariana is here in the room, where we see, let's say, a proposal that tries to make sense of the vernacular patterns of association, so how people actually build up communities and try to develop it as a new and alternative approach to the production of affordable mass housing and adequate mass housing. And so all these themes, let's say, have not just one project like the ones that I've just commented, but each of these sections has 3 projects, visually documented with, well, compelling and beautiful images. So we invite you to take a look at it in this short video, also with a beautiful soundtrack. So, well, this is it. So the book, I guess that, well, for those interested, I think if you go on the usual places, you can find it available. We also have some copies here on the table that we are, well, happy at least to give a complimentary copy to those who are featured in the book that have not received it yet. And yeah, we look indeed forward to the follow-up, and indeed also the works in Mumbai, in Dhaka, in Tema are all good examples of crucial, well, urban conditions that need to be discussed, addressed, and we believe that this, combination of more reflective modes of questioning these, well, changing realities, on the one hand, complemented with the creativity of the students and the search, this continuous search for alternative approaches to the production of affordable housing, which has been to a certain extent always seen from the perspective of efficient delivery, but not really meaningful, let's say, account of how people should live. So we hope that this book already, and the series that this will hopefully become, can help rethinking a little bit housing design in an era of rapid urbanization. And that's it about the book. I guess that's, if I don't know, Dick, if you
No,
want to
that's fine.
comment.
No.
And so now we will have, we will just leave also some room to discuss potentially some of the topics that we just presented at the end. But now the next, well, the next event, or the next part of this small event would be, let's say, the screening, probably the world premiere, let's say, as at least as live streaming. So we did it already in closed doors of Antonio's documentary. But I will leave to Antonio to introduce.
Thank you, Nelson. Yeah, first of all, I would like also to thank you, Nelson, Dick, and Marina, to participate actively in the movie, because you are the narrating voices of this documentary that I shot 2 years ago in 2019 in Dhaka. It was shot during 2 weeks of the field trip, and I think the themes that were investigated were really in continuity with the elements and topics we have been discussing so far. So it was really about looking into the city and the small-scale gestures of the so-called urban invisibles shaping the city and their role. And indeed, it also was part both of the research with the studio, but also of something I wanted to understand about the city. And I think I will just give this small anticipation before watching the movie of an anecdote that I think refers very much to what we are discussing. One day at the end of the trip, I was with Jorgo and Arman, 2 architects that worked with Marina, and they took me to one of the buildings in the site, a 10-story concrete building, to take some shots, aerial shots of Dhaka. And so from this construction site, where actually the construction workers were actually sleeping there, I took some beautiful panoramas images of these fast-growing cities. But these beautiful images, you will not see them. They are not in the documentary. What I actually included in the documentary was something else that I saw from that roof terrace. You will see in the movie a sequence about the roof landscape in Dhaka. And so from there, since the buildings are so close, no, they call it also handshake buildings, you can really see into the houses of people, but not only in the houses, in the terraces. And when you look into Dhaka, that it's so turbulent and there's almost no space for withdrawal from urban life, those places became almost like, as Marina puts it, a new level of ground floor. And you could see really from very close people talking from one terrace to another, cutting their hair, drying food. And I think the movie is really about these kind of things.
Let's have a look.
Yes.
Let's watch it.
Let's watch it.
Thank you.
I think I'm going to sit there, otherwise you move over there.
Yeah.
villages. And as far as I've seen, people do have an intention of living in villages. Life is so much better. There is a quality in life when you live in a village. Obviously, opportunity is less. There is a certain pace at which students move. So things move very slowly. There is very little change that happens. So, but I don't know if that's something not desirable to people. I really can't comment on that. But as far as I've seen, coming to the city is almost like the last resort, when there is not enough income for a family, when they really are struggling to survive, that's when they come to the city. It's not an option. It's the very last resort, that if you do not come to the city, if you do not make the money, it's there is no way of surviving. So that's when people move. And there is many from different locations in Bangladesh, people move to the city for very different reasons. From the coastal areas, people generally lose their land to the river erosion, and they move to the city because they don't have place to stay. There is not enough lack of opportunity, meaning that there is not enough land to cultivate. So then they move to the city. They move to the city also to make enough money to be able to financially be independent. But the city for them is a transition. It's a place where they make money. This is not home. So obviously, once they have enough, they go back. So the intention is always to go back home, and home is village. So in a way, that's how they see these cities. So it's not a place to stay. It's not home. So for me, it's a very tricky situation. Cities will probably always be that way. Yeah. But if we could probably bring in more opportunity to the villages, then perhaps this would be a completely different scenario. So, to see villages as something that is somewhere out there, and that kind of notion probably needs to change. We probably need to also extend certain things and make it lively enough and give opportunity enough in the villages where people do not really think of it as an option to move to the cities. That's something that is constantly on my mind.
Well, the process of rural-urban migration are, to a certain extent, a phenomenon that may be striking when we walk the streets of old Dhaka, and we all of a sudden are in the middle of the most dense, built environment that you have experienced in this world. It's the densest part of the densest city of the densest country in the world. And then if you just look into the images of the countryside in Bangladesh, you see, what for us is perceived as this, strong bond between man and nature, the water, the agricultural fields of the delta, and so on and so forth. And then you wonder why people voluntarily live that almost, ideal symbiosis between man and nature to come to this, very challenging, let's say, built environment where you have to share a 10 square meter room with 4, 6 other people. Now, Charles Correa always took a very strong point in saying that people would not come to the cities searching for a house or a home. People come to the cities searching for a job. And that means that they come pursue a dream of economic independence, a dream of to achieve something that maybe even in their lifetime will not make them climb the social ladder, but maybe will provide their children education or their family provide better living conditions. And I think it's that dream that they keep on pursuing that makes them, let's call it, tolerate some of the challenging living conditions that they have to face here in the city.
জায়গা নিয়ে জানালা নিয়ে বা আলো বাতাস নিয়ে একটু বলেন আমি তারপর lack of cross ventilation, so it's pretty important for me to do. He doesn't have a separate veranda, you know, storage room, you have to
I was curious, where do those people sleep now?
কোথায় ঘুমায় কিভাবে ঘুমায় এইখানে কয়জন ঘুমায় আচ্ছা আর আপনার ওকে সো আর ছেলে okay there's a bed under this bed so the boy gets that out and sleeps at night. 3 of the girls sleep here and the husband sleeps in that.
Okay.
Usually that's the practice. The elders are in the outside. You're more
Even in the most dense urban environments, well, people find different ways of interacting with the space and creating places. And that's exactly why I mentioned earlier that one of the crucial things that we need to do and to know as architects is how people organize their everyday lives. And now some spaces become special places, not because they were designed as such, but because it simply happened. And when we have good clues to, even in the densest urban environment in the world, to be able to identify and then probably be able to translate and reinterpret these spatial conditions that could really cater for the coexistence of the most busy corner or intersection, just 100 meters away from a peaceful space for meditation and all that. Because that happens when we investigate, let's say, the cities like Dhaka or Mumbai, and we just need to be aware of how they come about, how they came about, so that we can also try and make them part of our possible scenarios for future listeners.
Roots have always been in the culture. People, most of the time do not go out as much. Let's say a film, especially women, they always climb to the roof. Of course, it gives you an enormous amount of space, especially actors. In the afternoon, when the sun has gone a little bit lower down, the temperature has reduced. It's a beautiful breeze. So everybody goes to the roof. It could be, from hanging their clothes, from just collecting the dry clothes, or even drying some sort of food, or even doing gardening, or just to socialize between one roof to the other. It's been there in the culture. So it's more like a ground, which is not the ground, but it's an elevated, which is elevate the ground in a flat scale, and that becomes your next level of flat scale.
Yeah, I think the need to find a place, let's say, where you can withdraw yourself from all the activities and noises is quite obvious. But yeah, it's also, for me, let's say, really quite amazing to see how people can find in the extreme dense urban conditions of places like Dhaka or other cities in the global south. But they manage and used to a certain, or get used to a certain condition. In the other part of Dhaka, it is so extremely dense, so full of people, so full of activity, that you wonder how can people endure this condition. But maybe if that is your condition you are growing up in, then yeah, you seem to accept it, and it becomes a normal condition.
can take challenge very easily. They face it and they have that positive energy and drive to just keep going. So that's what I think is the most important and driving factor. That's also the case where Bangladesh is in a way moving ahead. It's not because we have a lot of resources, we don't have an extraction-based economy. It's all because of the resilient people who makes it run. It's a completely private sector-oriented development. The other day when we were listening to all these different talks, there was somebody who mentioned that in one of your groupmates mentioned that in 2015 it was some $1 billion that were coming into the country as remittance. So can you imagine just people doing hard labor are actually the main driving force of an entire nation. So that is just probably the answer, that it is the resilience and the hard-working people that drives this. People don't get exhausted. The exhaustion is also about losing hope, and I don't think that happens. When you have opulence, you have too much, then you have those, these extra ideas, or then you have the ability and the option to think whether impressed, all these mental conditions that comes out of opulence when you have too much. But when you're actually fighting for your basic needs, you don't have time to indulge in these finer levels of mental conditioning.
This idea of collectivity, of sharing, let's say, good and bad times, is something that maybe in our part of the world we have lost, and in a much more individual society. And probably that is something that we can learn from, that we could even admire, let's say, in the way people organize their lives in the informal setting. I mean, it's amazing, and it's also wonderful to see, of course, because it's amazing that energy is not there anymore, and then it becomes an impossible situation to live in this world.
except some parts which where the interviewees maybe could have showed more bright face, and but it's not your fault. It's the fault of the interviewees. No, seriously, I think that the documentary is beautifully made and quite striking, catches this reality that, of course, for us, it's at the same moment, let's say, fascinating, but also causes a certain, concern, right? So maybe I will also invite, let's say, those of you in the audience live here, if you want, just, raise your hand if you want to ask a question to, Antonio, or then eventually also to one of us here. But maybe what I would like to start with, because, you have been there, Ramona was part of the same design studio working in Bangladesh, and Rohan was one of the instructors in another studio, in this case in Mumbai. And I think that I would like at least to ask you, when confronted with this reality that is so different from the one that you were used to, so what kind of lenses, also in this case producing the documentary, do you need to use? I mean, how do you decode this strangeness, let's say? I mean, how do you filter it from all the material that you collected? So what you brought together in this movie, what was the criterion? So what was, is it, the most beautiful shots, the most striking? Share with us a little bit of your, let's say, position as a cinematographer here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a difficult question. I think that the first days there, for sure, also looking back at the material shot, were a lot of non-filtered shots. So a lot of chaos and turbulent movement that I think it's how, at first, especially from us coming from this part of the world, we perceive, no? That, but then later, I think some of the instruments, the typical instruments of architecture, for me were not really immediate to record that experience. So indeed, one of my other tool that I've been working with since I was a child was filming, and I think this way of observing and recording certain specific elements was something that remained forever in my mind. I think that I'm just going to say this and thinking about Caesar, that when he says that every time he goes to the site, he just starts sketching and even just start putting the building in already in the project. And he says that just looking, it's not enough for an architect to keep those images with you when you are on your desk designing. And so I think one of the things that this was for me, it was really recording some raw observation on the field that I think I will always have with me on my eyes, not only because I've spent a lot of hours editing this, but because they will really become part of me. So I think it makes observation less superficial and more empathic. I think this is what I can think of.
And Ramona, so one of the projects that is exhibited here, it's exactly your project to Dhaka. And now considering, let's say, Antonio's perspective, let's say, from someone who's standing behind the camera and then synthesizing this experience in this documentary, maybe I would like to ask you, how did you synthesize your experience in Dhaka, let's say, and then creating an architectural project, let's say, for housing? So what kind of ingredients did you have to, reflect upon, try to unpack, address? And could you share it a little bit with us?
So first of all, it was really, really nice to see Antonio's movie again after 2 years, and kind of like reviving what we've experienced there. Because indeed, like when we first arrived in Dhaka, the city itself has been so overwhelming and so hard to grasp in a way. Like where is there any organization or structure in this? Like coming from Europe, everything seemed quite chaotic, or like me and my colleague Tessa, who made this project together, we always compared it to some sort of growing organism that somehow works with all its parts. It somehow works, but it's we later figured out, and you could also see again now in the documentary, that some parts in this organism are advantaged, and that might be through capital or education or skill. And they have the power in a way that they keep this economy in a way growing, and they can, for example, private developers develop the city further and further and further. And of course, it doesn't make sense for them to invest in people without skills or money, because that won't bring them any return. However, what is very, very clear also in the documentary is that these people are just as essential as everyone else. They also cater to this big, big organism that Dhaka is. So in the project that we developed, Tessa and me, we basically just tried to nourish, we compared it to maybe some sort of weaker plants that don't get enough sunlight because they live in the shadow of those that are advantaged, stronger. So what we developed was some sort of support or framework that can be used by the lower income groups to basically find a space within the city, to not be pushed out or to the side of a road, but they have a space to appropriate the space, because the spaces they live in, they're not necessarily bad. And indeed, they had their own organization. They kept it very clean, the way they would never enter with their shoes on, or they had their own organization within their informal settlements. So we developed some sort of framework, but gave them the responsibility to appropriate these spaces and also find common spaces with other income groups to create this social mix, because the places where these people meet is not necessarily in the residential buildings, clearly because they have different standards but the places they meet are the places where they are of service, right? So in the private sector, in marketplaces, or also because they might be working for the mid and higher income groups as drivers or servants in the household. So we try to create some sort of social mix in this sort of framework that can cater for both low, mid, and higher income groups. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Ramona. And in this sequence of trying to make sense of how to unpack these realities that are to a certain extent strange, but then Jörg Simmel would say that you can also have the objectivity of the stranger, because you are not embedded in a special group where you may be biased towards the reality. And so the eye of the stranger, well, Simmel argues that can be more objective than those that are, to a certain extent, embedded in that society. And so now I turn to Rohan, because you, of course, have been working also with the Global Housing Program already for many years. So you did part of your education in India, in Mumbai, and then you came to Delft, you finished your master's in Delft, and then you also became part of the teaching team of some of our studios, and now you are doing also your PhD. Now, I'm curious also to,
Sounds like a lot.
Yeah, so you have been quite prolific and productive. And I would like to ask you, so what's when you were involved also in this educational program, have you ever felt, let's say, that there's a certain romanticization of the stranger, let's say, a certain romanticization of people like me, Dick, Ramona, or Antonio that come from Europe and are used to let's say urban realities that are not really like Mumbai's or Dhaka's, and that they fail to understand the real heart of or the pulse of the city. What was your experience when you were also involved as a teacher, let's say?
Well, the short answer is no, and it's no because I don't think that there has been a sort of romanticization of these kinds of informal settlements in the way that we've been doing the studios, both when I came as a student myself, but then also being engaged in the design studios afterwards. And I think the key out here and what we've been doing is to really set up key collaborations with local partners and institutes. And that's been very helpful because we've never gone to one of these places just with our camera and no one else on the ground to help us. There's always been a two-way street, a sort of dialogue, and that's really helped. And I think that's helped us not look at these kinds of settlements through a sort of very rosy picture. And I think the other thing that has been done in the studios that I've certainly looked at in my own work as well, and I think has been very useful, is to look at housing through different kinds of lenses of policy and patterns of inhabitation, what you showed in the book just a while earlier. And I think that forces you to really look at housing sites in a lot more detail rather than just arrive there with your cameras and iPhones and take a few photographs and then go back. I think this deeper engagement has really helped, I think, understand housing for what it is, understand both the challenges but also the opportunities, the energy but also the squalor. There's always a sort of conflict between these kinds of things that we experience. And I think, you know, the pedagogic, let's say, instruments that have been introduced in the school have been very helpful. But I just also want to say a couple of things about Antonio's movie, because I've seen it as well at the same seminar that Ramona saw it last at. That was October 2019, and now I'm seeing it again. And I think what it does really beautifully, really vividly, is to do three things that really stand out for me. One is that it shows in one of the opening scenes very clearly that housing is not just a place of shelter, but it's really a site also of economic and social mobility. So you see in those opening scenes that it's as much about the tea stall and the little shop that's selling mutton and the children playing on the street as it is about a home. And that's something that also comes out of, let's say, the patterns of inhabitation exercises we do. We look at those kinds of activities and practices, and I think the film really brings that out really beautifully. The other thing is what Marina was talking about, which is the new landscape. She was referring to the roof that becomes another layer that the city could respond to, and I think that's very important, and I think a lot of the projects pick up on those kinds of ideas and then come up with design solutions that allow for that rather than hinder it. And that's important because, well, climatically that's very useful. You don't have to build another room. You can just simply create a courtyard or a terrace or some kind of balcony that people can use for 75% of the time through the year because the climate allows for that. And the third thing, of course, that she pointed out was the role of the state and the lack of planning at the macro level. And it's only been, let's say, supply of housing through let's say, private enterprise, and that there's really a need also for the public, of course, the people as well. And these are ideas that I think resonate with all the geographies we've been looking at, so Tema and Mumbai certainly as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Rohan. And is this one? Oh, no, it is. Thank you, Rohan. And so then I turn to Dick, and of course I could ask a question to one of the many hats that Dick could wear. I mean, as dean of the Faculty of Architecture at the TU Delft, but also as a designer and also as an educator. But actually now I'm interested in your role as a designer, on your part of your career as a designer, and also with quite an extensive experience in housing design. So after also being exposed to all these, work with partners in all these places that we've been talking about, also with the work of the students, to what extent do you feel at a certain moment that you are sort of, representing, the face of a kind of a neo-colonial approach where you bring your expertise, from one of the richest countries in the world to try and teach how housing should be in places like Dhaka or in Addis Ababa, or is it the other way around, or you are actually also getting some sort of or learning some lessons from all these different worlds that you have been exposed to. So how does it work? Also, if now you don't think, so you're not a co-editor of that book, you are not the dean, you are not a professor, you are just a designer. So how do you see this experience?
Well, you already, let's say, you showed us two directions. Obviously, I hope I'm working, let's say, with the second perspective. And I think I can be honest in saying that that's really true. That's why after 10 years, I still like to be involved in the studios, because I myself also as a designer learn a lot. You say, we could say, okay, we know how to do it, but that's of course absolutely not right. Maybe there is more experience in time of the processes of urbanization, because, well, in Europe, in our part of the world, they started 100 years earlier. But we made so many mistakes in that, so it's maybe learning from the mistakes. But I don't think we can really show how to do it. And one of the obvious mistakes is, of course, that, also, of course, at some moment, we coined terms as mass housing, housing for the larger number. So it was about volume, it was about numbers, and I think what we really learn is going to India, to Ethiopia, to other places, that you see there that, of course, the challenges are so huge, and it is also about numbers, and the need for housing is so large that you see that the number takes command. And I think together with the local partners, we try at least to discuss that and look with our students in Delft, but also with Dhaka students or Mumbai students, can we come up with alternatives that, of course, also address the numbers, but also try to look beyond the number and see if design can also address, well, simply the everyday life and needs of the people who are going to live there. Because I think that's what failed in our part of the world often, and not only the house itself, but indeed, as Rohan said, also the surroundings that we create by building housing. And that is something that you can learn a lot from, to see how people indeed also in the informal settlements or the self-built settlements, how do they live and how the spaces are used. And then again, not to romanticize that. We had students in our studios who decided to design nothing at all because they thought, this is the best way to live and why should we come up with something else? That's also too simple. But really trying to match these things. What we see, what we learn, with, on the other hand, what we know about how can you actually construct, build housing that is affordable for those with little or no means.
If someone from the audience wants to ask a question, just please raise your hands. I will just now move on, and then I mean, following up on Dick's comments, so I will take advantage of having two alumni of Global Housing Studios to ask you also a question regarding, I mean, what is it good for? I mean, this experience, in the sense that this is not the kind of commission that you will get, well, as an intern working in an office well, at least in most of the offices that I know in Europe. So it's not really designing the kind of project that you have been involved with. So, you know, considering that is probably also what happened with many other, students that were involved in these studios. So what is your sort of, takeaway from this experience? Because of course, Antonio, you directed this documentary, but you also an architect, right? So how do you then, I mean, is there something that this experience has changed in the way that you address architecture or your professional life now?
Yes, I think it's an important question, no? Because after doing the studio, you come to the world, and all of this beautiful experience is not something that you can find easily. But I think it's definitely something that, to me, it's clear that the objective of studying this and the tools that I've developed during this was not just to make housing. Indeed, I think that a film like this could serve as a tool to understand a reality and then react in whatever way you want. So I think it's an approach, it's a set of tools that I had the chance to develop in the way, indeed, to look at the small-scale gestures of people and also to learn from the context itself and not to go there and come up with a very original solution that you can wake up in the morning with, but something that while studying and researching on site on how people live and indeed some self-organizing structures that there are more evident, but I think everywhere it's possible to recognize. So also the attention to the climate, to the specific context, I think it's something that doing the studio is something that you get some sensitive approach. It comes to my mind a reflection from Virginia Woolf that says that we should use our eyes to look at the exotic and make it familiar, but also look at the familiar and make it somehow strange, to be able also to go back to your own reality and looking at it as the objective eyes of a stranger. So to be also critic towards our society, what we are doing, where are we going, and what are the things that are happening. And I think this is something that definitely from this experience you can take. I think.
Thank you. Ramona, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with Antonio. It's certainly, especially the tools that we used. For example, we went to Dhaka and we started studying the patterns. And this this ethnographic approach we did, I later also used in my master thesis, and I'm pretty sure I will keep on using this if I continue to design housing. But even if I start designing housing in Europe, for example, these tools are always valid. The context is a completely different one, but the way to approach it, I think, is a very valuable one, and I really appreciate that we had the chance to do that in such a faraway place like Dhaka. But they're still valid when we use them here. And looking at the problems there of like income inequality and social segregation, I mean, it takes a form that is very unusual for us, but these things also exist in European cities. It's not like it doesn't happen here. It just takes different forms, and just seeing how these dynamics work in different parts of the world, I think that is in any way a valuable lesson.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think on this positive note, and considering that we are reaching the end of our time slots, I would wrap it up now. And so, thank you for those of you in the audience here live, but also those watching the broadcast, the live broadcast on YouTube. And we'd also like to thank the staff at the ECC for having us here and organizing this event, especially to Lucia Pedrana. And but finally, I would like to thank Antonio, Ramona, and Rohan for joining us here. Of course, I don't thank Dick because Dick is the partner in crime. So is just. I think we are both. I think on behalf of Dick, I would like to thank you and ask you to help me with a little applause.
And we'll be back at 6 o'clock.
And then we will be back at 6 o'clock with the Bregje talks on 7 billion at home housing in an urbanizing world. See you soon. Thank you.